I'm not able to marry, wept the Apache woman, until the lonely cowboy proposed to her. The sun had just begun its climb over the jagged peaks of the desert, casting long golden shadows across the dusty ground. The land stretched endlessly in every direction. Red rocks, dry mesas, and scattered scrubby bushes that clung stubbornly to life. Somewhere in that vastness, a young Apache woman named Nayeli walked slowly, her bare feet pressing lightly against the warm earth. She carried nothing but a small bundle of herbs and a water skin, yet her heart felt heavier than the weight of all the mountains around her. Nayeli had grown up surrounded by stories of brave warriors, clever hunters, and women of wisdom who knew the land as if it were written on their own palms. She loved these stories, but they often reminded her of the place she could not reach, the life she could not have. For Nayeli, the thought of marriage was not simply a matter of meeting the right man. Something deeper, more binding held her back. Something that made her think that she would never know the happiness that came with companionship. As she walked along the narrow trail that wound through the canyons, Nayeli's thoughts were like the soft wind brushing over the rocks, persistent, endless, and full of quiet sorrow. She remembered the day she had realized that her path might always be different. She had been younger then, running across the desert with her friends, laughing without care when a visiting elder had spoken of duties and responsibilities. Nayeli had listened carefully, nodding politely, but inside she had felt a cold weight settle in her chest. That day she had begun to understand that her life was intertwined with obligations that might never leave room for love, or for the simple joy of holding someone's hand and calling them family. Her home was a small, humble dwelling on the edge of the village, built from adobe and stones gathered from the surrounding hills. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, curling lazily into the sky as the first birds began their morning songs. Nayeli's family, though kind and loving, were strict in their ways. Every day came with rules, schedules, and expectations. Her mother often reminded her that a woman's life was to care for her people, to honor tradition, and to follow the path set before her. Nayeli had always tried to do these things, to be obedient and helpful, yet a quiet voice in her heart whispered that there could be something more, something that her duties and rules could not give her. The morning sun grew stronger, and Nayeli stopped at a small rise overlooking the valley. From here she could see the village in the distance, tiny shapes of adobe huts, a few figures moving slowly along dusty paths, and the animals grazing near the water. She often came to this spot when she needed to think. Today she thought about the stories she had heard as a child, the tales of women who had married and found joy, the tales of men who had loved and been loved in return. Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. Perhaps those stories were meant for others, not for her. Despite her sorrow, Nayeli was not alone. The land itself seemed alive around her, full of whispers and gentle sounds. The wind carried scents of sage and desert flowers. The distant cry of a hawk echoed from the cliffs, and somewhere, water trickled quietly over rocks in a hidden stream. These small gifts of the earth reminded Nayeli that she was part of something larger than herself, something enduring and strong. Yet even the beauty of the world could not erase the loneliness that settled in her heart. She remembered the nights spent lying under the stars when the sky was so clear that the Milky Way stretched like a silver ribbon above her. The stars had always seemed like friends, distant yet comforting, as if they could see her worries and offer silent understanding. On those nights, Nayeli sometimes whispered her thoughts aloud, even though no one was there to hear. "Why must life be so difficult?" she asked once, her voice barely louder than the soft wind. "Why can't I love and be loved like the others? But the stars, though beautiful, did not answer. They simply glimmered, patient and eternal, as if to teach her that some questions could not be solved quickly. Her daily routines kept her occupied, yet they also reminded her of the limitations in her life. She gathered water from the small stream each morning, tending carefully to the plants her family grew and helping with the small animals that wandered near their home. Nayeli was skilled and careful in everything she did. She could start a fire even when the wood was damp, identify which herbs could heal and which could harm, and she moved with a quiet grace that made it seem as though she were part of the land itself. Yet skill and grace did not bring her the companionship she desired, the feeling of being truly understood by another person. On this particular morning, as Nayeli collected water and tended to her chores, she noticed a group of children playing near the edge of the village. They laughed and ran, their joy spilling into the air like sunlight. Nayeli smiled softly, remembering the days when she had been one of them. But the memory was bittersweet, for she knew that her own path had diverged from theirs. While they dreamed freely of adventures, families, and futures filled with love, Nayeli's dreams were shadowed by doubt and duty. She sighed, dipping her hands into the cool water, letting it flow over her fingers as if washing away her worries. Despite the weight she carried, Nayeli's heart was not without hope. She often allowed herself small moments of daydreaming, imagining a life where she could walk freely beside someone who truly cared for her. In her mind she pictured laughter shared by a campfire, hands brushing as they walked through the desert, and quiet mornings where worries were fewer and love was present. These dreams were fragile, delicate things, but they gave her the strength to keep moving, to keep living with grace and purpose. As the sun climbed higher, casting harsh light over the desert floor, Nayeli paused at the top of a small hill. From here, the horizon seemed endless, stretching far beyond what her eyes could see. She thought about the future, uncertain, unwritten, and full of challenges. But as she stood there, feeling the wind lift her hair and touch her face, she felt a small spark of courage. Maybe one day she would find a way to follow her heart without betraying her people, without ignoring the rules that had always guided her. Maybe, just maybe, something unexpected could change everything. The day passed slowly, filled with the familiar rhythms of life in the village. Nayeli prepared food, cared for the animals, and listened carefully to the advice of the elders. Each task reminded her of her place, of the responsibilities she could not escape. Yet even in the midst of routine, her mind wandered to the impossible, what it might feel like to be loved freely, without fear or restriction. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. A tiny flame flickering in the midst of a vast desert. As evening approached, Nayeli climbed once more to her favorite hill. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, and the shadows of the cliffs grew long. She sat quietly, watching the sun sink behind the mountains, letting the beauty of the moment fill her senses. A desert, though harsh and unyielding, held moments of peace and wonder that reminded her of the strength she carried within. And as she breathed in the cool evening air, she whispered a small prayer, not for herself alone, but for courage, for patience, and for the possibility that life might hold surprises she had not yet imagined. For Nayeli, the desert was both a home and a teacher. It taught her resilience, patience, and the quiet strength needed to face each day. But it also mirrored her loneliness, reminding her that some desires were hard to fulfill, some dreams were delayed, and some hearts carried burdens that could not easily be lifted. And yet, as she watched the stars appear one by one, sparkling in the vast, endless sky, Nayeli felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, in a world as wide and mysterious as this, The impossible could someday become real. The night deepened and Nayeli returned to her home, her footsteps soft against the earth. She carried with her the quiet knowledge that her life was not simple nor easy, but that it was hers to live. The fire crackled gently in the hearth and the scent of herbs lingered in the cool air. Nayeli settled down to sleep, her thoughts lingering on the distant horizon, on the stories of love and courage she had always admired. She closed her eyes, and for a moment the desert seemed less vast, less lonely, and filled instead with possibility. The desert had a way of hiding surprises, though Nayeli had learned to trust its rhythms more than she trusted strangers. The days passed slowly, each blending into the next, with the warmth of the sun and the quiet songs of birds in the distance. But one morning, as the sky glowed pale gold and the wind carried the scent of sage, a new presence appeared on the horizon. A lone rider, his figure small yet steady against the vast landscape. Nayeli noticed him first from the ridge above the village, where she often went to watch the sunrise and gather her thoughts. The rider was a cowboy, a man who moved with careful confidence across the rugged land. His hat shaded his eyes, and a worn leather coat clung to his shoulders as he guided his horse along the dusty trail toward the village. Nayeli felt a flicker of curiosity and caution at the same time. She had seen travelers before, passing through, bringing news or goods, but this one felt different. There was a quiet purpose in the way he rode, a steadiness that suggested he belonged somewhere, even if that place was unknown to her. As he approached the village, Nayeli observed from her perch. Children paused in their games watching him, and elders glanced toward the newcomer with careful interest. The cowboy dismounted with ease, his movements smooth and unhurried. He led his horse to the edge of the village and began to tie it near a small stable. Nayeli noticed the gentleness in his actions, how he treated the animal with patience rather than force. It was a small detail, but it told her much about the man. Over the next few days, Nayeli saw him more often. The cowboy, whose name she later learned was Eli, moved quietly through the village, helping with tasks wherever he could. He repaired fences, guided animals to water, and assisted in clearing paths that had been worn by wind and rain. The villagers began to trust him, for he did not demand praise or recognition. He worked simply because it needed to be done. Nayeli found herself observing him more and more, fascinated by the ease with which he adapted to the life of the village, a life that she herself had known since childhood. Their first real conversation happened by chance one afternoon. Nayeli had gone to the stream to gather water and herbs, and Eli was nearby, tending to a small herd of goats. One of the animals had wandered too close to a rocky ledge, and Eli moved swiftly to guide it back to safety. Nayeli called out a soft word of warning, and he turned, giving her a nod of acknowledgement. "You watch over the animals well," she said quietly, her voice barely rising above the gentle rush of water. "I try," Eli replied, his tone calm, respectful. "They trust me, and I trust them. The land teaches patience if you listen carefully." Nayeli tilted her head, intrigued. "The land teaches patience?" she asked, her curiosity growing. Eli smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the sunlight. "Yes, the desert is unforgiving, but it rewards those who are careful. It shows you who you are if you pay attention." There was something about his words that resonated with Nayeli. She had spent her life listening to the land, learning its secrets, yet hearing someone else describe it in such understanding felt different, almost comforting. She nodded slowly, unsure if she wanted to speak further or simply let the moment linger. Eli seemed to sense her hesitation and offered a small, encouraging smile before returning to his work. Over the following weeks, their paths continued to cross. Nayeli would see him early in the morning, guiding animals, mending fences, or helping the elders with small tasks that required strength and care. Each encounter was brief but meaningful. She began to notice the little things: how Eli listened when someone spoke, how he treated each person with respect, and how he never sought attention for the good he did. Slowly, her curiosity turned into quiet admiration. One evening, as the sun began to dip behind the mountains, Nayeli was gathering firewood when she heard a familiar voice calling softly. "Need help?" Eli asked, stepping out from behind a rock with a small bundle of wood in his arms. Nayeli hesitated, then shook her head. "No, thank you. I can manage." He stepped closer, setting the wood down near hers. "I insist," he said gently. "It will go faster if we work together." She allowed him to help, and as they worked side by side, a comfortable silence settled between them. The sun painted the desert in shades of orange and pink, and the air was warm with the fading heat of the day. For the first time in a long while, Nayeli felt a lightness she had not known before, as if the weight of her worries had been softened by the simple presence of another person who understood her world. Their conversations, though brief at first, grew longer and more personal over time. Eli asked about the land, the animals, and the village, and Nayeli found herself sharing small details she had never voiced to anyone else. She spoke of the herbs she collected, the plants she studied, and the quiet places where she went to think. Eli listened with genuine interest, never interrupting or judging, only offering gentle encouragement. "You have a deep knowledge of this land," he said one afternoon as they walked along a dry creek bed. "I've never met anyone who understands it like you do." Nayeli felt a warm flush at his words. Few people had ever recognized the care and attention she gave to the desert and its creatures.
"It's what I know," she replied softly.
"The land has always been part of me, and it will always be," Eli said, nodding. "But sometimes, even the strongest roots need someone to walk beside them." She paused, considering his words. There was a tenderness in his voice, a quiet honesty that made her heart flutter. Yet fear lingered in the corners of her mind. She knew her life was complicated, bound by rules and traditions she could not ignore. Love, she thought, was a luxury she might never afford herself. Still, a small spark of hope began to grow, a hope she had not felt in years. One afternoon, Nayeli found herself alone at the edge of the village, painting small designs on a piece of leather. Eli approached quietly, carrying a bundle of dried flowers. "These are for you," he said simply, offering them with both hands. Nayeli took the flowers, surprised. Nayeli, they were small wild blooms from the nearby hills, bright and delicate against the desert dust. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because you notice the small things," he said. "And sometimes, small things deserve recognition too." For a long moment, Nayeli felt words fail her. The gesture was simple, yet it spoke volumes. Attention, respect, and care without expectation. She realized that Eli did not see her as someone who was trapped or limited. He saw her as she truly was, capable and strong, yet deserving of kindness and understanding. The days turned into weeks, and their friendship deepened. Eli began to join Nayeli on her walks, helping her carry water or gathering herbs alongside her. They laughed quietly at small jokes, shared stories of their pasts, and found comfort in each other's presence. Nayeli began to look forward to these moments, and though she did not yet understand the feelings growing within her, she knew they were unlike anything she had experienced before. Still, Nayeli's heart was cautious. She often reminded herself that she could not let hope grow too quickly, that her life was not hers alone to change. There were traditions, family expectations, and unspoken rules she had always respected. But the more time she spent with Eli, the more she wondered if perhaps some rules could bend, if perhaps the heart could find a way to follow its own path without betrayal. One evening, as the sun set in a brilliant blaze of red and gold, Nayeli and Ellie sat together on a rocky outcrop overlooking the village. The air was warm, filled with the scent of sage and distant wildflowers. They shared a quiet meal of bread, dried meat, and fresh herbs, and for a while no words were spoken. The world around them seemed to slow, and the silence was comforting rather than empty. "You are different from anyone I have met," Nayeli said finally, her voice soft, almost shy. Eli looked at her, his eyes steady. "And you are different too," he replied. "I've seen you every day, working, caring, listening. I've seen the way you honor this land and your people. It's extraordinary." Her heart fluttered, though she tried to hide it. "I don't know if I am extraordinary," she said quietly. "I just try to do what is right. Extraordinary is not always about grand deeds," Eli said gently. "Sometimes it's about how you live each day, how you treat the world and the people around you. You do that in a way that matters." As the stars began to appear in the sky, Nayeli felt something shift within her. Eli's words, his presence, and the way he saw her, truly saw her, were beginning to fill a space in her heart she had long thought empty. She realized that life could be more than duty and sorrow. It could hold moments of connection, moments where understanding and care were offered freely. That night, Nayeli returned home with a quiet hope in her heart. She did not yet know what the future held, and she still feared the challenges that lay ahead. But for the first time in many months, she felt a sense of possibility. Perhaps the world had room for her dreams, for her heart, and for someone who would walk beside her patiently and kindly as she navigated the life she had always known. Days flowed into weeks, and the friendship between Nayeli and Ili grew in quiet, unspoken ways. Every encounter brought them closer, though neither spoke of the feelings beginning to stir between them. Nayeli had spent so long believing that love was a luxury she could not have, yet she found herself anticipating Eli's presence with a mixture of curiosity and longing. She noticed the way he moved through the village, quietly helping without expectation, and the way he listened to her words, always patient, never hurried. Each gesture, small and ordinary as it seemed, carried a weight that touched her heart. One morning, Nayeli rose early, as she often did, and walked to the stream to gather water. The desert air was crisp, tinged with the scent of sagebrush and wildflowers, and the first rays of sunlight painted the rocks in soft golds and pinks. Eli was already there, tending to the goats he had guided to the water. He looked up as she approached, offering a quiet smile. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Nayeli replied, her voice calm, but her heart beating faster than usual. Together, they moved along the stream, collecting water and herbs in a rhythm that felt natural, almost like a dance. They spoke of simple things, how the animals had slept through the night, which plants were ready to harvest, and the occasional amusing stories of village life. But even in these mundane conversations, a sense of connection grew. They shared quiet laughter, and the warmth of familiarity settled between them like sunlight on the rocks. As the day grew brighter, they found a shaded area beneath a large mesquite tree and sat down to rest. Nayeli traced patterns in the dirt with her finger, thinking about the life she had always known and the strange, gentle influence Eli had begun to have on it. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly, her eyes fixed on the ground. Eli paused, considering her question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted, but I feel like this is where I need to be for now. There is work to do, people to meet, and a life to understand before moving on. Why do you ask? Nayeli looked up at him, her eyes reflecting both curiosity and uncertainty. I wonder if life is meant to be different, she said softly. If perhaps we are meant for things we do not yet see. Eli nodded slowly. I believe that, he said. The desert teaches patience, but it also teaches us to notice opportunities when they appear. Sometimes what we seek is closer than we realize. Nayeli felt a small warmth spread through her chest at his words. He always seemed to understand without asking too much, as if he could see the thoughts she did not speak aloud. And yet there was a caution in her heart. She reminded herself of the rules, the traditions, and the obligations she had lived with all her life. Love was not something she could pursue freely, and yet her heart whispered that perhaps Eli was the one person who could change her world. Over the following days, Eli continued to show his quiet devotion to the village and to Nayeli. He repaired fences with care, guided animals through difficult terrain, and helped elders with tasks that required strength or patience. But it was in the small, almost invisible moments that his presence became most meaningful to her. When he handed her water without a word, when he waited for her to finish her thoughts before speaking, when he offered gentle encouragement instead of advice, these were the gestures that etched themselves into her heart. One afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent behind the mesas, Nayeli found herself walking along a narrow canyon trail. Eli appeared at the bend, carrying a bundle of firewood. "Hello," he said softly. "Hello," she replied, smiling faintly. Without a word, he joined her on the trail, their steps matching naturally as they walked together. The canyon walls glowed orange in the fading sunlight, and the air was filled with the subtle scent of wild herbs. It was a quiet, ordinary moment, yet Nayeli felt its significance deep in her chest. She realized that she had begun to depend on these moments, to find comfort and even joy in the simple act of walking beside another person. As they reached a small clearing, Eli set the wood down and turned to her. "Nayeli," he began, his voice low and steady, "I hope you know that I respect you deeply. I respect your knowledge, your heart, and the way you care for your people. I do not expect anything in return. I simply wish to be near you if you allow it." Nayeli felt her breath catch. His words were honest, unassuming, and filled with a sincerity that she had rarely encountered. I do not know if that is possible," she whispered, struggling to reconcile her feelings with the boundaries she had always followed. "I am bound in ways that make it hard for me to be free." Eli nodded, as though he had expected her hesitation. "I understand," he said gently. I only ask that you consider the possibility that there can be understanding and care, even in difficult circumstances. I am patient, and I will wait, if you allow me." She looked at him, the fading light casting shadows across his face. In that moment, Nayeli realized that her heart was no longer indifferent, that the walls she had built to protect herself were beginning to soften. And yet fear remained, fear of disappointment, fear of breaking tradition, fear of stepping into the unknown. She had always been cautious, and for good reason, but Eli's presence was slowly teaching her that perhaps caution and hope could coexist. Days turned into weeks, and their bond deepened further. They began to share stories of their pasts, careful memories spoken aloud in the quiet of the desert. Nayeli spoke of her childhood, of the elders who had guided her, and of the moments she had spent alone under the stars, dreaming of a life she thought she could never have. Eli, in turn, shared stories of his travels, of distant towns, and of the solitude that had defined much of his life. Each story revealed another layer of understanding, another connection forming between them. One evening, after a long day of gathering herbs and tending animals, they sat together beneath the stars. Nayeli leaned back against a rock, gazing up at the sky. "Do you ever feel lonely?" she asked quietly, almost to herself. Eli sat beside her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "I have," he said softly. "But I have also learned that loneliness can teach you to appreciate companionship when it comes. It can show you what truly matters, even if it takes time to arrive." Nayeli felt a warmth in her chest at his words. For so long she had carried her sorrow silently, believing that it was permanent. But in Eli's presence, she felt the beginnings of something different, something fragile, yet bright, like a candle flickering against the darkness. Their friendship, though still unspoken in its deeper meaning, became the center of Nayeli's days. She began to notice how his presence eased her worries, how his steady calmness offered comfort when she faced challenges. The villagers, too, observed the growing bond, though none spoke of it aloud. There was something unspoken yet undeniable, a quiet respect, a shared understanding, and the beginnings of something more profound than either could yet name. Yet, despite the growing closeness, Nayeli remained cautious. She reminded herself that love was not easily earned, that her life was shaped by obligations and expectations she could not ignore. She struggled with her feelings, sometimes retreating into herself, other times allowing a small smile to linger when Eli appeared. The tension between her heart and her duties created a quiet drama that played out in each glance, each unspoken word, and each shared moment. One afternoon, Nayeli found herself at the top of a hill, looking over the village as the sun began to set. Eli joined her silently, carrying a small basket of freshly picked herbs. Together they sat in companionable silence, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. Nayeli realized that these quiet moments, shared in trust and understanding, were becoming the most cherished parts of her days. "Eli," she said finally, her voice soft, "I do not know what the future holds. I do not know if life will allow us to be close in the ways I hope." Eli turned to her, his eyes steady and gentle. "I do not know either," he said, "but I do know that we can walk this path together, carefully, with respect for what must be honored, and courage for what is possible. That is all I ask." Nayeli felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from a deep, tender emotion she had rarely experienced. For the first time, she felt that her heart might have a chance, that perhaps there was room for hope, even within the constraints of her life. She nodded, understanding that the path ahead would not be simple, but that it could be shared with someone who truly saw her, respected her, and cared for her deeply. As night fell over the desert, the stars emerged once more, twinkling like distant promises. Nayeli and Ellie remained seated on the hill, side by side, sharing the quiet companionship that had grown between them. It was a fragile, delicate bond, but it was real, and it was theirs. And in that moment, Nayeli felt something she had not felt in a long time: possibility. A sense that life, though uncertain and challenging, could hold moments of joy, understanding, and connection, even for someone who had long believed such things were out of reach. The desert was quieter than usual that morning, as if it too sensed that something significant was about to unfold. Nayeli rose with the sun, the cool air brushing against her skin, and felt a mix of anticipation and unease. Life had begun to feel different with Eli nearby. Every moment they had shared, every conversation, every walk through the canyons, every quiet smile had made her heart lighter yet also more uncertain. She still struggled with the rules and traditions that shaped her life, but for the first time, She sensed that change might be possible, even if it was slow and fragile. Ellie, as always, was already up before the sun, tending to the animals and checking the fences. Naeli watched him from a distance for a moment, feeling a warmth she could not name. There was something comforting in his routine, in the steady way he moved through the desert, and she realized that his presence had begun to fill a part of her life that had long been empty. He was patient, gentle, and yet strong, a rare combination she admired more than she could admit aloud. The morning passed in quiet labor. Nayeli gathered herbs and water while Eli helped with the animals, their tasks overlapping naturally as if they had been working together for years. They spoke little, but the silence between them was easy, filled with understanding rather than tension. Nayeli found herself noticing small things about him, the way he handled the animals with care, the way he moved confidently across uneven ground, and the subtle kindness that marked even the smallest gesture. As the day grew hotter, Eli suggested they take a break under a large mesquite tree near the stream. He carried a small basket filled with fresh herbs and bread, and together they sat in the shade, sharing a simple meal. The coolness of the tree's shadow and the gentle sound of the water flowing nearby created a peaceful moment, one that Nayeli cherished. "Do you ever think about the future?" Eli asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Nayeli looked at him, considering the question. "I try not to," she said softly. "It is hard to know what will happen. Life often changes in ways we cannot control." Eli nodded, understanding in his gaze. "That is true," he said, "but sometimes the future can be shaped by the choices we make today. Even small choices can lead to something greater." Her heart fluttered at his words. Her heart fluttered at his words. He spoke gently, never pushing, yet his meaning was clear. He believed that they could navigate the unknown together, that even in the face of uncertainty, there could be hope. Nayeli wanted to believe him, yet fear lingered, a shadow that reminded her of the obligations and traditions that had guided her entire life. In the days that followed, Eli's presence became even more significant in Nayeli's life. He began to accompany her on longer walks through the desert, helping her gather herbs from distant areas and tending to the small animals that roamed near the village. Their conversations grew deeper, exploring not just the land and its needs, but also dreams, fears, and memories. Nayeli shared stories of her childhood, the lessons she had learned from elders and the quiet moments she had spent under the stars imagining a life that might never come. Eli listened, never interrupting, his eyes reflecting care and understanding. One afternoon, as they walked along a narrow canyon, Nayeli noticed that Eli seemed more thoughtful than usual. He stopped suddenly and turned to her, his expression serious but gentle. "Nayeli," he said, "I know your heart carries burdens that I may never fully understand. But I hope you know that I will not abandon you. I will wait, and I will respect your choices, no matter how long it takes." Her chest tightened at his words. She had feared rejection, had feared that someone might not understand her constraints, yet here he was, offering patience, respect, and steadfast care. I appreciate that," she whispered, unsure if she could find the words to convey all she felt. Eli reached out, briefly touching her hand in a gesture of comfort. The contact was fleeting, yet it sent a warmth through Nayeli she had not known she could feel. She realized that her heart was opening in ways she had thought impossible, that trust and affection could exist alongside caution and responsibility. However, as their bond grew stronger, challenges began to surface. Not all villagers understood the closeness developing between Nayeli and Eli. Some whispered quietly, curious and cautious, unsure of how to interpret their friendship. Nayeli could feel their gazes at times, a reminder that her life was not hers alone to shape. There were rules and traditions she could not ignore, expectations that weighed heavily on her, and the knowledge that pursuing her heart would require courage she was still gathering. One evening, as the sun sank behind the red cliffs, Nayeli found herself alone at the top of her favorite hill, thinking about Eli and the strange, gentle way he had entered her life. She thought about the possibility of love, of companionship, and the quiet hope she felt whenever he was near. And yet, she also felt the weight of uncertainty, the fear that her circumstances might never allow her to embrace the life she longed for. Eli appeared without warning, stepping lightly onto the hilltop. He carried a small bundle of fresh flowers and herbs, a thoughtful gesture that had become familiar over the weeks. "Hello," he said softly, his voice blending with the gentle desert wind. "Hello," Nayeli replied, her voice carrying a mixture of joy and apprehension. They sat together, side by side, sharing a silence that was both comforting and charged with unspoken feelings. The flowers lay between them, small tokens of attention that conveyed care without pressure. Nayeli felt her heart swell with emotion, yet she knew she could not give herself completely, not until she had reconciled her duties with her desires. Eli broke the silence gently. "Nayeli, I have come to care for you deeply," he said, "not just for the moments we share, but for the strength and wisdom you carry. I understand that life is complicated for you, but I want to be someone you can rely on, someone who will stand beside you no matter what." Tears pricked at Nayeli's eyes. She had long feared that love would never find her, that her path was set in stone. Yet here was Eli, patient, understanding, and unwavering. I do not know what to say," she whispered. "I fear that my life, my duties, make it impossible." Eli reached out, taking her hand in both of his. "Then we will face it together," he said softly, "step by step, with care and patience. I do not expect the impossible. I only hope for the chance to walk this path with you." The sincerity in his voice touched Nayeli deeply. She realized that she had begun to hope in ways she had thought impossible. Perhaps it was not only about the rules and traditions that bound her, it was also about courage, patience, and trust. She could not ignore her feelings any longer. They were real, undeniable, and slowly reshaping her understanding of what her life could be. In the following days, Eli's quiet devotion became even more evident. He sought ways to help Nayeli without demanding attention, always mindful of her boundaries. Whether it was carrying water, repairing fences, or simply walking beside her in silence, his presence offered comfort and support. Nayeli began to notice that even small moments felt significant. The shared laughter at a goat's mischief, the gentle teasing over a stubborn donkey, the soft words exchanged in the quiet of the desert. Each instant strengthened the bond between them, deepening her trust and affection. One afternoon, as they walked along a hidden canyon path lined with wild flowers, Eli stopped suddenly and turned to her. "Nayeli," he said, his voice firm but gentle, "I know that challenges remain. Life is not simple, and there will be moments of doubt. But I hope you know that my care for you is unwavering. I will respect your choices, and I will be here, patient and steady, if you allow it." Her heart ached with emotion. She wanted to believe him fully, to embrace the hope he offered. Yet she was cautious. Fear of the unknown still lingered, yet it was tempered by the realization that someone could see her, truly see her, and care without expectation or judgment. I will try," she said softly, her voice barely audible. Eli smiled gently, squeezing her hand in reassurance. "That is all I ask," he said. "Step by step, we will find a way." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Nayeli and Eli walked together in companionable silence. The canyon walls glowed softly, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of wild herbs and dust. For the first time, Nayeli felt a sense of possibility she had never allowed herself to imagine. Life was still uncertain, and challenges remained. But for the first time, she believed that love, patience, and understanding could coexist, even in the midst of duty and tradition. The night fell, and stars twinkled above like distant promises. Nayeli and Eli returned to the village side by side, their hearts quietly intertwined. Though the path ahead was not simple, a turning point had been reached. Nayeli realized that the bond they shared was growing stronger with each day, that care and respect could overcome fear, and that perhaps, just perhaps, the impossible could become possible. The desert was alive with color as the sun began its slow descent behind the red cliffs. The sky glowed with shades of gold, pink, and orange, painting the landscape in a warm, gentle light. Nayeli walked carefully along a familiar canyon trail, her heart beating faster than usual. She carried a small bundle of herbs, but her thoughts were far from her tasks. Today felt different. Something in the air hinted that change was near, though she could not yet see it clearly. Eli appeared suddenly around a bend in the trail, his figure calm and steady. He carried a small basket filled with wildflowers and herbs, their bright colors contrasting beautifully with the dusty red earth. When he saw Nayeli, a soft smile spread across his face. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice warm and steady. "Good afternoon," Nayeli replied, her voice carrying a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing gently against her heart, though she could not yet name why. Eli approached her slowly, setting the basket down beside a smooth rock. "I wanted to bring you something," he said. "A gift from the land, for someone who cares for it as much as you do." Nayeli knelt to examine the flowers. They were small, bright, and delicate, with soft petals that seemed to glow in the fading sunlight. "They are beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." Eli watched her carefully, his eyes reflecting both the warmth of the sun and the depth of his feelings. "Nayeli," he said softly, "I have waited for the right moment to say something important. I hope you will listen to me and understand that I speak from my heart." Her breath caught. She had suspected, deep down, that this moment might come, yet hearing it spoken aloud filled her with both excitement and fear. "I will listen," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Eli took a deep breath and began. "I have come to care for you deeply, Nayeli. I respect your heart, your wisdom, and your strength. I know your life is bound by duties and traditions that I cannot ignore, and I do not wish to ask anything that would cause you harm or sorrow, but I cannot hide my feelings any longer. I wish to walk beside you, to share your days and your burdens, if you will allow me." Nayeli's hands trembled slightly as she held the flowers. She had spent so long believing that love was impossible for her, that she could never find someone who would understand and respect her life. Yet here was Eli, offering not just affection, but patience, respect, and unwavering care. "Eli," she whispered, unsure of what to say. He stepped closer, his expression gentle and sincere. "I do not ask for an immediate answer," he said softly. "I only ask that you consider the possibility that we could face life together, honoring both the traditions you hold dear and the love we could share. I will wait, as long as it takes." Tears pricked at Nayeli's eyes. For so long she had carried a heavy heart, filled with longing, duty, and the fear that she would never know the joy of companionship. Yet here was someone who not only understood her, but who had offered his heart freely, patiently, and without expectation. Her lips trembled, but she managed a small, sincere smile. I have never met anyone who sees me the way you do," she said softly. "I have feared that love was impossible for me. I have feared that my life would never allow happiness in the way others know it. But you have shown me patience, care, and understanding that I did not think was possible." Eli took her hands in his own, his touch warm and reassuring. "Then perhaps we can take the next step together," he said, his voice filled with gentle hope. "Not as a rush or a demand, but as a promise that we will face the future side by side with respect, courage, and care." Nayeli felt her heart swell with emotion. The words he spoke, the presence he offered, and the steady kindness that had defined their time together all converged in this moment. She realized that the love she had long thought impossible was not only possible, it was here, tangible, and offered freely. I would like that," she whispered, her voice trembling with happiness and relief. Eli's smile widened, but it was a quiet, humble smile, reflecting his patience and understanding. "Then let us begin," he said softly, "one step at a time, honoring who we are and what we hold dear." Together they walked slowly along the canyon trail, hand in hand, feeling the gentle warmth of the fading sun on their faces. The desert around them seemed to shimmer in approval, the red rocks glowing in the evening light, the wind carrying a soft, fragrant scent of wildflowers. Nayeli felt a sense of peace she had not known before, a quiet assurance that life could hold both duty and joy, tradition and love. Over the next few days, their bond grew stronger as they shared small tasks, laughter, and quiet conversations. They worked together to gather herbs, tend to animals, and help the villagers with everyday chores. Each moment felt meaningful, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was shared. Nayeli noticed how Eli's presence eased her worries, how his steady calmness offered comfort, and how his patience allowed her heart to open at its own pace. One evening, as they sat atop a hill overlooking the village, Eli turned to Nayeli with a gentle expression. "Do you remember the first day we walked together?" he asked. "I knew then that there was something special in you, something I wanted to understand and protect." Nayeli smiled softly, recalling the early days of their acquaintance. "I remember," she said. "I was cautious, unsure of what to think. And yet, there was something in you that felt safe, patient, and kind." Eli reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I promised to wait, and I have kept that promise," he said. "But I also promised to be honest about my feelings. And now, I hope we can take the next step together, not because it is expected, but because it feels right." Nayeli's heart ached with joy. She realized that the man before her had become an inseparable part of her life, someone who had earned her trust, respect, and affection through patience and care. I feel the same," she whispered. "I have wanted this, even when I was afraid to admit it." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Eli knelt before her, holding a small, simple ring made of woven silver and stones. "Nayeli," he said softly, "I do not ask you to abandon your life, your people, or your duties. I only ask that you walk with me, as equals, with love and respect. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Nayeli's eyes as she looked at him, overwhelmed with emotion. She had long believed that such a moment would never come, that the love she longed for was beyond reach. Yet here it was, offered with patience, understanding, and unwavering care. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking with happiness. "Yes, I will marry you." Eli smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger, and rose to stand beside her. They embraced, the warmth of their hearts matching the fading sun over the desert. In that moment, Nayeli felt a sense of completeness she had never known. She realized that life could hold both responsibility and joy, duty and love. The impossible had become real, and her heart was full. In the days that followed, the village celebrated quietly, respecting the traditions while honoring the love between Nayeli and Eli. Their lives were busy, filled with daily work, care for the animals, and tending to the land. Yet, amidst the routines, there was a new energy, a shared joy, a deep respect, and a quiet sense of companionship that enriched every moment. Nayeli often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the long nights under the stars, the solitude she had once embraced, and the quiet sorrow she had carried in her heart. And now, she saw that patience, courage, and understanding had opened the way for a life she had only dreamed of. Eli, too, cherished each day, feeling gratitude for the trust and love Nayeli had given him. He knew that their bond had been built slowly, with care and patience, and he vowed to honor it always. Together they faced the challenges of life with strength and unity, their love growing with each shared sunrise and sunset. One evening, as they sat together watching the sun sink behind the mesas, Nayeli rested her head on Eli's shoulder. "I never imagined this life," she said softly, "and yet it feels like it was always meant to be." Eli wrapped his arm around her gently. "Life has a way of surprising us," he said. "Sometimes the most beautiful things come when we least expect them. And now we have the chance to share everything, our joys, our challenges, and our hearts." Nayeli closed her eyes, feeling the desert wind brush against her face, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. She realized that love, patience, and understanding could coexist with duty and tradition. She had found the impossible, and it was real, tangible, and filled with hope. As the stars began to appear, sparkling above the vast desert sky, Nayeli and Eli sat together in silence, hand in hand. They did not need words to express their feelings. In that quiet moment, they knew that they had found something enduring, a bond that would carry them through the days ahead. The desert, once a place of solitude and longing, now shimmered with possibility, reflecting the love and connection that had grown between them. And so, with hearts full of hope and hands intertwined, Nayeli and Eli embraced the life ahead, together, with patience, respect, and love.